Then we can think with our own direct experience, the main cause of our unhappiness in our life is our own mind, more than anything else. Due to our own dissatisfied mind, and all other afflictive emotions, we become very unhappy and suffer a lot. Therefore, in order to inner peace and joy, we need to work with our own mind by reducing, overcoming those afflictive emotions as much as possible. And to do that, we need to cultivate the antidote, the opposing force, internal opposing force of all the positive state of mind, emotion, realizations. And to be able to cultivate those and develop those, we need to meditate practice correctly, continuously. And without certain level of concentration and focused mind, it's very difficult to success in any of our practice with so much distracted mind. Therefore, we need to develop and improve our concentrations, our focus, and to do that, we need to know how to do that. And for that very reason, that we are trying to study, learn about how to develop concentrations, better focus, attentions, by studying Lama Tsongkhapa's Lam-Rim at the moment. And our act of coming together, studying together, become cause and condition to actualize and attain fully enlightened state. So we can be greatest benefit and support to each and every sentient being. Helping them to liberate from the samsara and guide them to fully enlightenment. Okay. I prostrate to the other people. Then, thus did I hear one time that Bhagavan was dwelling on the massive Baltic mountain in Raspia, together with a great community of monks and great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was observed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates as also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that in the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wish to practice the activities of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent. Form is empty, emptiness, form, emptiness, not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, standless, not without stand, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factor, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattva rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond the era, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened in the unsurprisable, perfect, complete enlightenment and relying on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection and wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurprised mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that truly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom declared that gade gade parasam gade bodhi soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. Is it like that one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding the entire along the words of God, humans, Asura, Gandharvas, overjoyed and highly praised, that's spoken by the Bhagavan. Sa shi be ge chon shen me to ta re ra ne yin de ge ba de sang ge shin du mi de o ai do kun nama da shin che ba idam Gururana Mandala Aya. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the method I try to listen to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Jodan Soke Jonam, Janju Pado Dane, Dagi Shojaki Vesonam, Dola Penje Sangye Doba, Sangye Jodan Soke Jonam, Janju Pado. Dagi Shojaki Vesonam, Dola Penje Sangye Doba. Kanye do jenye zone, tawa tamde kame, tabe chene chene, odamde la chata. So we are on middle Lam-Rim, and we have in the section of the great scope, and within that the six perfections, and within that after the six perfection, then especially more detail on the last two perfections, the perfection of concentration, Shamata or concentration, and special insight, and we are on the material concentrations. So within that, we went through, creating the right conducive conditions. And then once you have created that conducive conditions, then the preliminary practices, and after the preliminary practices, then finding the right posture and the right cushions, and then the six preliminary practices, and then the actual practice of Shamata. And within the Shamata, we went through different objects that can be the object of Shamata, external object as internal object, different state of minds, and to take internal objects such as love as the object of Shamata, or that will be a little bit more difficult, because first you have to have developed the love, and then you keep that as an object of that. So for ordinary beings, maybe some beginner, maybe it's easier to use other object, which might be more easier. But of course, there Lama Tsongkhapa explained different type of objects, and specifically here, we talk about taking the Buddha's image as the object of meditations because of specific more benefit. Even though in terms of just cultivating a Shamata, we can use, any kind of objects, even just like a flower. But by focusing on flower, there's nothing special benefit than cultivating a Shamata. But if we use a Buddha's image while we develop Shamata, at the same time we create a lot of positive merit and a lot of positive imprint just by having that object all the time. And it helps us to develop more stronger faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha when we have a refuge. Also to remember the Buddhas, and so there are many other extra benefits. And so therefore, according to Kamala Shila, that he recommend that, and Lama Tsongkhapa following that. And then in terms of the objects, if we take objects such as Buddha's image as an object of Shamata, and important is that in terms of the I think I did already mention before, but again, just kind of going through a little bit. In terms of the height, is like your towards your forehead, you know. Normally when we visualize on top of the crown when we do, but here when you are trying to develop shamatha, there is not on the crown, but like where it is your forehead, you know, like your in terms of that. And distant, you know, it can be not too distant and not too close. It's like if you open your eyes where you can see it, you know, that level, you know. And then in terms of the size, normally they says, you know, like 4 inches is to develop concentrations. Normally, again, when you visualize for other purpose, refuge field, merit field, we visualize kind of life size and then on top of our crown. But here for the shamatha, you visualize smaller, like 4 inches, for example, and not on top of your crown, but in a, for your forehead, you know, in terms of the height and smaller size. And then one of the things visualize is very kind of, one is very heavy, very heavy. So it helps to keep our mind more kind of stable. If the object is too light, then it feels like it's moving, you know, like wind. And when the object starts to move, then your mind moves because your mind is following that object. So therefore, you try to visualize it's like very heavy, but with a kind of with a light, you know, bright light. And so that heaviness helps you to develop more kind of stability, not moving so much when you visualize the image like a very heavy, you know, unimmovable. So it helps your mind be more stable, not moving so much. And if you keep it more bright, it helps to overcome the laxity and dullness, you know. It's like it makes your mind a little bit more brighter. If it's dark, then your mind becomes more kind of sluggish or dullness, you know. So therefore that helps to have more stability and more kind of keeping that bright with the light, help to not to be too dull or too laxity. And sometimes when it's even sometimes it if you make it more smaller, sometimes it helps your mind, because you have, when it's smaller, you have to focus more. When you try to focus, because you have to focus more strongly, then again it helps to become your mind more alert and not too much kind of not too much laxity or dullness. So that is a little bit about that. And you know, for a very beginner, especially someone who have difficult visualization, at the very beginning we have the image of the Buddhas in front of you, whether it is a Thanga, statues, or pictures. You look with your eyes. You look with your eyes, and then without looking at it, you try to bring that image in your mind. So concentration, shamatha, has to develop through mental state, not a sense consciousness. But sense consciousness, like looking at that, can help us. So you can actually sometimes, for some, while you look at it, your eyes, your mind, your eyes is looking at the image, but your mind trying to concentrate it. And sometimes if you keep on concentrating your mind just without allowing to go anywhere else, but just at that, then slowly it is possible sometimes your sense consciousness started to dissolve. Even while you're looking at it, then because your mind is so focused, your mental consciousness is so focused while you are looking at with your eyes. And when your mental consciousness become very focused, then sense consciousness started to kind of almost like this. So you can't see with your eyes. Now you start to see with your mind, you know. So that is, for some, it can be helpful in that way. But normally you look at the image and you go, you know, what is the, all the details, you know, the posture, the color, and, in terms of Buddha Shakyamuni, you know, the pinnacles, the head, the hair colors, and the shape of the face and everything. You look, and then without looking, you try to bring that image in your mind. Sometimes it's helpful. That can be done, especially people who have difficulty with visualizing without looking at it. That's how you train yourself. Look and then not look, and then have image. Look and not look and have an image, and that is how you try to do it. So sometimes the sense consciousness can help us to develop the mental consciousness by looking, or sometimes some people, they have difficulty with concentrating on their mind, mental, but maybe sometimes when they hear sound, they can concentrate better, you know. So when you are doing with the sound, it's a sense consciousness, it's hearing. But then that can be, at the very beginning, a way to help our attentions, focus, and concentrations. And eventually, of course, we can't use the sense, but we have to develop through the mental consciousness. But that can be tools for some people using the sense consciousness, whether you're looking with the eyes or either listening to the sound to increase your concentration, attentions, and that can also help for some people. And and so that you look at the image, and then we already kind of discussed, at the very beginning of the start of your sessions, you make a strong you make a strong determinations, in terms of how you want to process, how long you are going to do the practice meditations, and how in terms of the what image, and what image, and in terms of what posture, what color, everything you have already ready in your mind. You have the what, and you make a strong determination at the very beginning that you are going to keep your mind focused on that particular objects in that way. And making that strong determinations is important. And how many even kind of sessions, minutes you want to meditate, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, I will focus and meditate on that amount of minutes. Making that strong determinations and motivation at the very beginning important. And then of course you try to focus on that. And at the very beginning you go through the details, and then and after going through detail, you have the general image of the Buddha, and then you just focus on the general image. And as I mentioned before, for a lot of us as beginner, you wouldn't have the clarity of the clarity of the image, and that is not a problem. As long as you have the general image, even if it's very vague, not clear, almost like sometimes it's just like hollow, you can see some shape, but even the shape is not clear. Or you might just see a kind of yellow color, in terms of Buddha Shakyamuni, but there is no details of eyes, nose, and like that. Just general, vague kind of image, and you just keep that. Because if you try to focus too much on the details, then you lose the stability. What we need to develop is stability at the very beginning. And sometimes what you are trying to have general image is some part of the body come clear, then you can focus on that detail. But normally you just try to keep on the general, even it is not clear, general image. And then once you develop that stability, then slowly we can focus on clarity, and also that will be easier to develop concentrations. first to have that stability, and for that purpose, you don't want to go too much in detail at the very beginning, and then we shouldn't be changing the objects, especially when you are trying to develop a concentration or shamatha, changing object morning and evening, or changing object today and tomorrow, or today and then next week. If we keep on changing object all the time, then we cannot kind of develop shamatha, So we just keep one object and we try to develop shamatha on the basis of that object. Once we have developed shamatha, then you can kind of direct to any object you want. But at the very beginning, when you are trying to develop shamatha for the very first time, then we shouldn't be changing the object, too often. If we don't have to change that, it will be very, and if we keep on changing too much, then we wouldn't be able to develop shamatha. So then you try to keep the same object without changing it. And then also, if you want to visualize Buddha Shakyamuni, which is golden color, if the color changes to blue, or sometimes our minds, while you are trying to focus on, sometimes just it change colors, and if you change color, you don't allow your minds to go in and bring back to the very beginning object, if whatever color, whatever posture. If you want to meditate on sitting posture, if you started to stand up, starting to walk, Buddha Shakyamuni started to walk, you shouldn't be following that. You should say, please sit down. Please sit down. Please don't walk and get distracted. So, we try to come back to the previous, whatever posture we want to, in terms of color, size, posture. You want to visualize a small size, and if it become bigger or smaller, again, that becomes kind of, your mind started to move again. And so those are some of the things that I think in terms of in relation to the trying to develop shamatha on the basis of Buddha's image. So I think that's a little bit that I think we already discussed, but I think I just wanted to kind of clarify some of the things. Where are we? Do you
Page
page
195. 195.
Okay.
The middle of the page, how to direct the mind towards it.
Okay. Okay. So then, so how to direct? Then there are 3 points, so you can read it. I don't need to go details. And so then the first presentation of formless approach, so here is saying, and within that, the first one, when we cultivate a shamatha or meditative concentration, it has 2 factors or features. One is your mind is able to abide on the object of your meditations, single pointedly, without any thoughts, stable, except for that mind, stability. So first, stability is one, and then other is clarity. So this need, in order to develop shamatha meditative concentration, you need to have stability and clarity. Those two, stability and clarity. So those two, in order to have a single pointed meditative concentration on shamatha to the object, two things need to be developed. 2 factors, 2 features, 2 characteristics, stability and clarity. those need to be developed. So that is what it's saying. And then, you know, on top of that, then some others has said, added up, you know, the joy, and then limpidity. I don't know limpidity, you know, limpidity in Tibetan is tanwa. What is that different from the clarity? Limpidity. In Tibetan, it is almost like same, you know.
It's a kind of clarity that is very like almost translucent.
Okay, okay. So then Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, you know, that we don't need to add those two of things. One, because limpidity is included in clarity. It will come in that. So you don't have to add that. And then in terms of the joy, because not every kind of meditative concentrations have that kind of joy, so you don't need to eat it. Because one, you know, when we talk of joy and blissfulness, one, we are talking about the result of the Shamata. And secondly, like when you have certain Shamata or meditative concentration of formless, for example, meditation of formless, they don't have the bliss and joy. You know, it is the feeling is more equanimity in that. And so therefore, again, therefore you don't need to add that one too. So then, so I think with that, yeah, because here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, so when we talk about limpidities, you know, it can be the clarity in the object and clarity in the subject. And then there are two, and then that clarity in both subject and objects can be developed when you have overcome the more subtle laxity. And that is developed when you have meditative concentrations, when you overcome the subtle laxity, then you can develop that both, you know, the clarity of with that clarity, it comes the clarity of both object and the subject. So, and I think that will probably come later, more on that, you know. Impeded, what is impeded? What the English word impeded means? When I read the English, sometimes I get confused. So I have to find.
So do we. Geshe-la, we get confused too. Just it's intense.
No, it's just the words where it says the emergence of such an intensity in the clarity factors impeded by laxity and single point. Mhm.
See, Geshe, are you using the word impeded, meaning
Yeah.
obstructed is what impeded
Yes,
means?
he is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that is okay. Now I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So then in order to develop the single-pointed concentration of shamatha, then what obstructs? In order to have the shamatha, then as I mentioned before, they need to have clarity and stability. And when we talk about clarity, it is not only about clarity of the object, but also is clarity about the mind itself. And with that clarity, then there is, when we say clarity that into the mind subject itself, the mind has some kind of alertness. Here they use the intensity, but kind of alertness. Sometimes you can have clarity, but you might not have the alertness or intensity in the mind. And so therefore, that kind of clarity, intensity is obstructed by that factor is obstructed by the laxity, whereas the stability, single pointed non-conceptuality, which means, without any other thoughts than the mind which is focusing on the object, there needs to be stability, and that kind of stability can be obstructed by the excitement. And for that is the reason why this laxity and excitement are the main obstacle to attain or to achieve the shamatha. So these two are the main obstacle. Why? Because in order to achieve the shamatha, you need to have stability and clarity. And laxity create an obstructs to the clarity, and the excitement obstruct to the stability. And so therefore they are the two main obstacles. Why these two are the main obstacles? Because in order to have shamatha, you need to have those two factors, and each of them have obstruct each of those factors or features. Okay, so that is what it is mean here. So then next come in order to develop and maintain meditative concentrations, then we need to overcome those two obstacles or obstacles to the shamatha. And in order to overcome those shamatha, we have to recognize and identify what are those obstacles. And so then identifying what is laxity, what is excitement, and then how they obstruct. And and then we know how to overcome them, method. So in order to that, then we need to identify there are three different level of laxity, three different level of excitement. Probably it might come maybe later. So in terms of laxity, there is a gross laxity, subtle laxity, more subtle laxity. In terms of excitement, there is gross excitement and subtle excitement and more subtle excitement. So we have to be able to identify, recognize what each of them, and then when we know that, then when we meditate, we know when any of them arises, then we can identify, and then we can apply the antidote. If we don't know that, even the arises, we might not be able to identify it, and we might not recognize it, and then we will not be able to, then we will not apply the antidotes, and so therefore So if we don't know those, what are the subtle and gross laxity and excitement, then we wouldn't know. Even when they arise, we wouldn't be able to identify and know, and then we wouldn't know how to apply the antidote, and therefore we will not be able to overcome them, and thereby will not be able to cultivate and develop the karma abiding or Shamata, And here it says, if we don't know that to do, then there's no way we can develop Shama. Not to talk about the special insight, you will not even be able to develop the Shamata, And of course, there wouldn't be a special insight, because special insight should be developed on the basis of the Shamata. And so therefore, here it says, those who are experts and those who have a wish to engage in Shamata, then we have to learn about that. Know more about what is laxity, excitement, and different level of them, and to know them better. And so then here say, laxity and excitement are the main interference or adverse condition to develop the Shamata. And then and therefore how to identifying them and how to stop them is going to discuss later, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. And then here he is saying, Lama Tsongkhapa instead, before that he's going to develop, talk about the generating the favorable conditions, and that is the mindfulness and vigilant. Here it is translated as vigilant. These two are the main tools to develop the Shamata. The main tools, the main tool to develop Shamata is the mindfulness and vigilant, or sometimes we translate as introspections. Introspections, yeah. So in order to develop Shamata, then we have to be able to keep our mind focused and single-pointedly staying or abiding on the object, whatever object of the meditations, and not only being able to stay on that object, but to be able to stay to the object continuously for the long time, and to be able to keep your mind without losing the object focus and for a long time, then we need these two tools, to keep our mind to focus without being distracted and continually focus on that. Then we need mindfulness and awareness or vigilance here. So the first is the mindfulness that helps us to keep our mind focused on the objects, not being distracted. And the vigilant help us to be aware of that, to be kind of watching whether our mind is focused or not, whether our mind is being distracted or not, or whether our mind is even not distracted, but whether our mind is, being either under the distractions or laxity, or whether there is a danger of laxity and excitement or distractions. So that is the functioning of the vigilant mind. So there are two different functioning. The mindfulness, the function of mindfulness, mind, it will come later. The functioning of the mindfulness is to keep our mind tied up to the objects without getting distracted, without losing the objects. And then the functioning of the vigilant is to make sure that it is kind of watching whether your mind is being distracted or not, whether your mind is being under the control of laxity or not, or whether there's a danger of distraction coming, whether there's a danger of laxity arising, that. And so being aware and kind of watching that. So these are the so as it says, the mindfulness is one which prevents mind from scattering away from the objects, losing the object, by scattering away or distracting. And then vigilance, second, is fully aware of the mind scattering away. So then the vigilant is watching whether your mind is scattered or not. Not only that, whether there is a danger of your mind being scattered or not. As your vigilant power get better and better, as your practice of vigilance get better and better, then you will be even aware, even before your mind gets scattered or under laxity, even before there are some condition coming, if you don't pay attention, it can be distracted. You are aware of that, then it's much more easier to take care of it, and because your mind is not already scattered. Once your mind is already scattered, you are aware, then it is a little bit kind of, it's better than not being aware at all, but still it already been scattered, And so, so here, yeah. So that is the function of mind, is to not to lose. Here is when mindfulness deteriorates, you forget the objects. So forget the object means losing the object, And when you lose the object, there is the distractions, and then you lose the object immediately, So forget means like not remembering in your mind, is in your concentration, you are losing the object in that, at your concentrations. And then the mind is, so how the mind is directed towards a meditation object, so you visualize whatever objects, in these cases, the Buddha's image, as we explained before. And then in your mind, there is an appearance of that image, and then we should try to generate a forceful mode of apprehending the object of your consciousness, uplifting mind. Here, uplifting mind means being very alert, okay? Being very alert. Because sometimes you can have the object in your mind, but there is no alertness. And if there's no alertness, then you can fall to the laxity, So you don't have the alertness. Sometimes, sometimes you can have stability and you can have even clarity. But if you don't have alertness, then still you have not achieved the Shamata. In order to achieve the Shamata, you need to have alertness or intensity, different. So here, uplift the mind, meaning that, you have that object of your meditations and keeping focus and direct your mind in that, placing your mind in that object, setting your mind in that object, keeping that object in your mind with a strong alertness, strong intensity. And once you have that strong intensity, alertness object in your mind, then you don't do any other analysis, you just focus on that. Just keep that. You don't try to do analyze. So that is place it without newly analyze anything. You don't want to analyze, go details, anything. You just keep on that. So that is, so then what is mindfulness? So here, identification of mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? So then it is one of the mental factors. So here, again, Lama Tsongkhapa, saying, according to the continuum of knowledge, as in that, by Asanga, there it says it has three features. So mindfulness mind is one of the mental factors among the 51 mental factors. So then, it has is in terms of the aspect of the mind, it's not forgetting or not losing the objects. And the object, what is the object? The object is the one which your mind is familiar with, that you have already had familiarity before, because when you talk about mindfulness, you have already have certain familiarity, whether it's a long familiarity or short familiarity, but you have familiarity to keep that object in mind. And then into the functioning, then it doesn't, it function to keep our mind from being distracted. And so that is the mindfulness. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa saying, sometimes mindfulness is also translated as a memory as well. In Tibetan, it's the same word, tempa. Tempa can be memory, can be mindful, and sometimes in certain translation you see a memory. And of course, when you say memory, it is something you have already familiar. That is something you knew before, something you have heard, seen, whatever is something familiar objects. And so that is so that object has to be something you are familiar with, And so in here, that the image of the Buddha that we have ascertained before in our mind, so that is the object, that. And then in terms of the apprehensions, or expect, then it's not forgetting, not forgetting the objects from your mind, So here, not forgetting the object means, in a way, it's not losing the object or your focus, not losing the focus of that. Your attentions, your concentration, not losing the objects. And so here again, Lama Tsongkhapa explained a little bit about that, not forgetting doesn't mean, when someone asks you, you can explain it, not in that way. Here, not forgetting means not losing the object or your attention, not losing the object of your meditations. So it's not like it is in your brain, but you have lost it in your meditation. So that is where Lama Tsongkhapa explained a little bit on that. So to make sure that your mind is not distracted, so this mindfulness helps us to get not distracted. The moment the distraction comes, and then we lose our mindfulness, And so therefore, we try to set or place the mind to the objects And then without any kind of other thoughts, without any kind of other analysis, without any other conceptual thoughts, we just try to keep and maintain that object continuously as much as possible, as long as possible. And so that is here, Lama Tsongkhapa, so without any other interruption, that's the real point of how mindfulness is applied. Keep the object, and then without any other thought, without any other conception thought, you try to keep that object in your mind for as long as you can keep continuously, sometimes for a few seconds, sometimes for a few more minutes, maybe, and for some other practitioner, it can be. So that is about the mode of apprehension. Then the functionings, So the functioning of mindfulness is that to make sure that our mind is not distracted and doesn't lose the objects. So that is the mindfulness, which has three features or three characteristics, in terms of objects, in terms of apprehension, in terms of functionings. And so that is the mindfulness. And so here, giving examples, of how it is in terms of the training, subduing or training the wild elephant. And you see that because I guess the wild elephant is not easy to train, but people train them, and our mind is giving examples, sometimes like a wild elephant, sometimes monkey mind, monkey mind is always jumping, monkey mind is always jumping. So our mind is sometimes giving example monkey mind, and sometimes like a wild elephant, hard to tame. The mind is hard to tame, just like elephant, and so when you are taming elephant, they try to chain the elephant with a chain, chain to the big trunk of trees, pillars, So like that, the mindfulness, the rope that tied up that wild elephant mind to the pillar or trunk of the object, whatever object here in the Buddha's image. So Buddha's image, the objects of the meditations, the Buddha's image is like the trunk or the pillar. Our mind is like the wild elephant. And the mindfulness is that rope that tied up the elephant to that trunk. And then the vigilance is like the hook that the trainer used to train the elephant. When they don't listen to them, then they hit with that hook, And then when they hit with that hook, then because of the pain, they listen to the trainer, and that is how they tame the wild elephant. In the same way, then when our mind is trying to get wild and trying to scatter, trying to get distracted, excited, and then with a vigilance, then we that hook of the vigilance, then we make sure that it is not scattering, it's not distracted. So it keep on to the object. So that is, and through that practice, then we can kind of tame and control our mind and develop kind of Shamata. When you develop a Shamata, then you have control over your mind. Then you can direct whatever you want. At the moment, you want to think here, and then your mind is somewhere else. And you want to think something else, your mind goes somewhere else. So we have no control of our mind. But once you have developed that kind of Shamata, then you have control over your mind. You know, you want to focus on that, and you can focus on that. You want to focus on other things, you can focus on other things. So wherever you direct your mind, it can totally be focused, attentive, and concentrated. And so that is example that given. And then and that example you give in about, you know, two of the Indian sources, Essence of the Middle Way and Stages of Meditation 2, Kamalashila, you know. So again, you see Lama Tsongkhapa, you know, one of the beauty of Lama Tsongkhapa, you notice when you read his writings, even though he was very highly, I might have said before, I might have shared, Lama Tsongkhapa was already highly developed meditator. He had already developed concentration. There is a story when they were having a ceremony, pujas, and he went in the deep meditations. The puja finished, everyone left, still he was there, unmoved. Someone came and kind of waking him up from his meditations. He was so in deep meditation that he was not aware of what is going on, you know, that the puja is finished, everyone is left and still like that. Despite that, he hardly talked about, oh, this is my experience. You hardly see there. Neither there is not much where he says, my teacher said this and that. Mostly he always go back to original sources. That is always, because that is much more reliable, that has been, Indian sources. He always go back to Indian sources. And so here, even with all this explanation, he always go back to original Indian sources, in the Indian commentaries, and then the sutras, back to always that. Because that is more stable. Because, for example, if someone, a teacher, becomes very famous, sometimes their realization might be wrong, and then they say, I have this realization and I have this and that, and people started to follow that, it can be totally mistaken. So these sources has been kind of, is like approved by centuries, by so many different teachers and meditators. So these are very reliable sources. So therefore, it is Lama Tsongkhapa always go back to that. Otherwise, sometimes, why don't he make it very easy, just explain how to meditate? Why go all these sources and back and forth and then trying to explain all of that, It's some complication, but it's much more stable, reliable, And it is also a teaching to us. It's also teaching to us, how we should study, Not just because one of my teachers says, because even though my teacher might had the right intention, sometimes they could be mistaken as well. So what they say, do they have a certain, what they say, do they have a support of the earlier masters from the Indian sources? Are they concurred? And if there is some kind of disparity from what of the earlier Indian masters says and source, then maybe there is something to something to think about it, something to, and so that is one of the things, I very much like about Lama Tsongkhapa's writing of that is his approach is so he himself was a great meditator. He had some of the greatest master at his time in Tibet. If you see, hardly there are any quotation from his masters here. All his writings, hardly there is any quotation in his master. There's hardly about saying this was my experience. Instead, he always go back to the Indian sources, commented in Sutra, and there's less dangers of being misled, less danger of misled. And sometimes misled are not because of the wrong intention. Sometimes there could be some wrong intention, but most time, because I think that is true or correct, but I might be totally mistaken. You know, even with the right intention, I think I have the right experience, but maybe I might not have the right experience. And so therefore, because these teachings by Asanga and all of that has been kind of over the centuries, so many meditators have used this and they have found it to be accurate. You know, if it was not accurate, many of the meditators would have come with the teaching how it is not accurate, and that over this so many years. And so therefore, I think, yeah. And so therefore, then Lama Tsongkhapa explanation of little bit of the two quotations that he there, you know, I think I don't have to read. I think that is quite easy if you read, you know. So whatever object that we are trying to focus on, with that mindfulness, we need to not only place the mind or set the mind to the object, but there need to be, as mentioned, there need to be some kind of, you know, strong intensity, strong alertness in that, you know. If there is no intensity and alertness in that, then we will not be able to develop powerful mindfulness, you know. And if you don't have powerful mindfulness, then you will not be able to stop the subtle laxity. And if you cannot overcome the subtle laxity, then you will not be able to develop faultless concentrations. That is what Lama Tsongkhapa was saying. As a result, powerful mindfulness does not arise, and since subtle laxity is not stopped either, the concentration becomes faultless. Okay, at the end of that explanations. So in order to overcome the most subtle laxity, there need to be intensity. At that point, even when we don't even have this subtle laxity at the moment. We have growth. When someone have that subtle laxity, they have reached certain point. You know, they have clarity, they have stability. But what is missing is that intensity, that alertness. And it will come later. Therefore, a lot of meditators mistake that for a concentration, Shamata, because they can be in a state, stability and clarity for days without distractions. Not only there's no distractions, not only there is no scattering of their mind, but they have also clarity of the objects. There's stability, clarity, and they can remain there for hours, days. So a lot of meditator thinks, oh, they have achieved Shamata. And there have been a mistake in the past. So there, Lama Tsongkhapa here he differentiates the subtle laxity and faultless shamatha or concentrations. In order to have that kind of faultless shamatha or concentration, you need to overcome that more subtle laxity. In order to overcome more subtle laxity, you need to have very powerful mindfulness. And you need to have this not only clarity, but intensity or the alertness. And so therefore, from the very beginning in training of our mind, when we train, from the very beginning, when we train mindfulness, we need to have the alertness. Isn't it? Sometimes like, whether it is with our mental consciousness or whether it is our eye consciousness, sometimes we see the object clearly, but there is no intensity, isn't it? It is like a little bit kind of, I don't know, there is in Tibetan Nyokdo, it is kind of like, not sleepy, but almost like being sleepy, There's no alertness or there's no freshness, refresh, you are not so refreshed. Even when we are doing some practice, sometimes we do practice, we are very aware of the practice, our mind is there, but there is no refreshness, kind of alertness, there's no intensity, And so, and that could also with the mindfulness, you can have mindfulness without that kind of intensity. And so here, Lama Tsongkhapa said, from the very beginning, when we train, we need to try to, when we try to train our mind to focus with mindfulness, you try to train with that kind of alertness or intensity so that we can build up very strong, powerful mindfulness. So then next one, so next it is even someone wishing to achieve Shamata by placing mind without thinking of anything must generate the power of mindfulness. So even though when you are trying to meditate, whatever objects, in this case, Buddha's image, without any other thoughts, without any other concept, without any, other minds, just focus on that object. Even with that, and trying to be mindful, but at the very beginning, here you should remind yourself, I will place the mind without conceiving any other object, whatever. So you try to gather that kind of strong intentions, that strong determinations is very important before you start that practice. That can have a strong influence while you are meditating. So that is another important factors that, I did mention before also, before we start the meditation, we need to develop that strong determination or intention or motivations, saying, that I will place the mind in that object without any other thoughts, without any other concept, without conceiving any other objects. And then with that, then we try to keep our mind as fresh, as alert, intensity, with that intensity totally focus on the objects, totally focus on the objects. I think this is very important factors that it is one of the things that Lama Tsongkhapa make very clarity in Lam-Rim that you don't see in many others masters explanation about this alertness or intensity, you know, and that is another unique Lama Tsongkhapa explained, you know, and that is bringing that alertness, intensity in our mindfulness, in our practice, is very important. Then eliminating and folding approach, the second, you know. And so Lama Tsongkhapa is saying there is a lot of misconceptions, you know. So the misconceptions is if there is, here they have used tightness, tight, you know, but because they think if there is too much intensity, you know, then you will not be able to develop the Shamata. There was a lot of misunderstanding, you know, when you are trying to hold here, held tight, meaning intensity, you know, when you try to have intensity in your meditations, here in the meditative concentrations, with that intensity, you place the object of non-conceptual without any other thoughts, you know. Then they say, even though there is no laxity, but then excitements or distraction predominates because you are too, they think you are too uptight. You know, you are too uptight because that intensity. Because of that intensity, you don't get laxity, kind of dull. You don't get dull. So it can help to overcome the dullness, laxity, but it will make you kind of too excitements. And so that is another obstacle, become obstacle to develop Shamata. And therefore, you know, then these things, when that happens, then you will not have the stability, because if your mind is predominated by excitement, then you wouldn't have the stability. Your mind keep on moving, you know, due to the excitements. And if your mind is moving, then you cannot have the stability, you know. And so that is what a lot of the meditator practitioner have taught, you know. But however, with my lofty mind lower, by loosening my tight grip of the Lord, I see stability factor arise quickly. And then they think if you kind of reduce that kind of intensity, alertness, and when you start to relax, then when your mind is relaxing, then your mind is less excited. And your mind is less, when your mind is less excited, then, you know, the stability factors come quickly. And on the basis of that, then they say, you know, this is an excellent method. So Lama Tsongkhapa, a lot of people think so and expound best meditation during the best relaxations. So what they say is relaxing is the relaxing. Not having too much intensity, alertness, but instead relaxing. The more you relax, the better your meditation is. That is what a lot of meditators or practitioners have misconception about that. So Lama Tsongkhapa is here. Lama Tsongkhapa explained again, not just he made up, but again by relying on Indian sources, finding the middle way is the key. Not total relaxations, not totally kind of, too much uptight. Too much uptight is another problem. Too much relaxation is another problem. And you have to find a middle way. And through your own experience. And that is the best way to develop the shamatha, that middle way. So Lama Tsongkhapa here is saying the concept that total relaxation is better for the shamatha is mistaken. And so then, he explained that misconceptions, and now he tried to clear that misconceptions. So here Lama Tsongkhapa says, this kind of misconceptions or positions is not being able to distinguish between the occurrence of laxity and the occurrence of meditations, Because as I mentioned before, when you have a more subtle laxity, you have that realizations, you have that clarity, but still you have not achieved the shamatha. Why? Why you have still not achieved the shamatha? Because there is no intensity in that. Because there is no alert and intensity in that meditations. There is stability. There's a clarity. Despite you have such a stability and clarity, the stability and clarity is so good that people can meditate for days in that state. Still, they can still not have achieved shamatha, still be in a more subtle laxity state. And because why they have not still gone beyond that and not reached a shamatha, because there is no intensity, alertness in that. And so here Lama Tsongkhapa, those meditators or practitioners had not been able to distinguish the shamatha and that subtle laxity, because they are very similar. There's a lot of similarity. There's stability, there is clarity, and they can meditate without distraction for hours and days. So of course, if I have that, I would think that, I might think, I have shamatha, you can meditate for 24 hours without distractions. Oh, that's some shamatha, there's no doubt, But here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, even without distractions for 24 hours and clarity, still it is not shamatha. And that is where a lot of practitioners get confused. And because what is lacking there is the intensity, that part. The intensity part. That is where it is lacking. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, as explained earlier, real shamatha, faultless concentration, require two features: stability factors of non-conceptual mind, which is stability, to be able to focus on the object without any other conceptual thought, without any other mind, without any other conceptual thoughts or thoughts. Yeah, that is one. Still, you have not achieved. Even there is such a stability, great stability. No other concept, no other thoughts, and totally focused without any distractions. And still, even though there is, your mind is very stable, but still you can have it confused and there is some kind of darkness or some kind of dullness. And if there is some kind of dullness, then it is laxity, still it is laxity. And whereas in order to have faultless concentration or shamatha, then you need to have not only stability, the clarity factor of mental limpidity, and So here, Lama, apparently you have failed to distinguish between lethargy and laxity. That will be explained below. Again, here, because they think, oh, it is not a laxity because it is not feeling dark or confused. When you are in that state, there is stability and there's clarity. So therefore, there's no confusion, there's no darkness, dullness, and therefore they think therefore there's no laxity, and therefore you have achieved Shamata. And Lama Tsongkhapa is saying there's a lethargy, and there is lethargy and laxity is different, that which he is going to explain later. When you have lethargy, then there is sense of dullness, that kind of dark and kind of confused, kind of sleepiness, different level of that too. And so, so basically, you can have clarity, but not what you call intensity. If that is the case, then oh, okay. It is something taught, blocked. I guess. No, I think I got. I should have read when I was. Now I don't remember someone trying to help with a. So I think maybe we will stop here, but I think that is something kind of we can think about. And again, you can, as I mentioned, I didn't read each of them. You can read. You can read yourself. And sometimes I think the translation also is a little bit kind of complicating. That is another. Not only me, even I think I have heard from English-speaking people who also find this translation quite hard. And I think this was translated a long time ago. This is the first, and they haven't done it. I think so. Anyway, yes. In many of the scriptures, they talk about stability and clarity. And then in the clarity, it doesn't explain the clarity of the object and the mind. And when we talk about the clarity of the mind, the subject, then there is certain level of intensity and certain level of alertness, and that is needed to develop the Shamata. And that is one of the clarification Lama Tsongkhapa's made, and Lama Tsongkhapa's contributions is one of that, and many of the others commentaries, you don't see that clarity, that distinguishing that part and clarifying that point. And that is where another important point that you find here of is that when we talk about clarity, it is not just about the clarity of the object to the mind, but the mind, clarity of mind, and not only clarity. When it says clarity, the mind, there's also the intensity part in that, and that is one of the things. Incredible Lama Tsongkhapa's kindness to clarify that. Yeah. Okay, so we do the dedications. Jawadi nyorto ta lama
Sangye Du Gyo Ne Do Wa Chi Kyang Ma Le Pa Ke Sa La Kwe Ba Sho Changjo Zen Jo Rinpo Che Ma Ke Pa Na Ke Kyo Che Kya Wa Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang Kong Le Kong Do Ke Wa Sho. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparable contents and gifts or abysses, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. To Chang Xin Jang Wen Jia Wei Den Rin Zhong Bei Wei Kun So Do Ko Zi Chou Song Ko Wei Le Mo To Du Pa Da So Du Je Gun Du Sha Pen. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night. Thank you. Good night.